Thank you very much. Warm welcome and understand. I think this is like just looking at the agenda. This is the 10th session today. So, and the topic, nevertheless, is very interesting. In fact, the title, trade and tariffs. I think we're missing one word here, which is also industry. So I think that the three words are tariff, trade, and industry, because that's where the trade will generate. So as most of you would be aware, given most of us are industry stakeholders, the government of Pakistan has recently announced the national tariff policy, which in itself is an aggressive step because it talks about slightly more unprecedented reform process on the tariff rationalization. And in 5 years' time, the absolute tariffs are likely to go down substantially. Obviously, if you look at the academic discourse on it, there are different views on it. There are different approaches globally that have been used. So in an ideal situation, we do talk about lowering of tariffs creates competition, and as a result, you grow and your exports increase. So that's sort of one side or the other. But then we also see a lot of practical examples and a lot of policy discourse which talks about how your tariff policy is a critical instrument of your active industrial policy, which guides your investment, which guides your industrial capability. So I'll try and focus more on and try to sort of converge the discussion here with our eminent panelists, all of them with wealth of experience, of practical experience, to really seeing how this discourse opens up for Pakistan and what should be our policy response and what we think on that. So I'll start with a more broader question first, and starting with Rizwan Saab first. So, we have, as I said, come up with the tariff policy. So I would start by your general broader view as an exporter and an importer as well, and a businessman in Pakistan, in terms of how you see that and both the positives and the negatives on it.
So it's been a long day. थोड़ा light-hearted discussion करते हैं. अच्छा हुआ आपने ट्रेड एंड टैरिफ पॉलिसी नहीं बना, वरना टीटीपी बन जाता है, बड़ा खतरनाक है. सो ये जो पॉलिसी है, अंग्रेजी के दो मुहावरे मुझे याद आ रहे हैं. वन इज पुटिंग द कार्ट बिफोर द हॉर्स, एंड द सेकंड इज जो आमिर अल्लाह वाला ने थोड़े टाइम पहले बोला था लंच में, वो ये है कि ऑल रोड टू हेल इज पेव्ड विद गुड इंटेंशन, राइट? सो इफ यू आस्क मी व्हाट द टैरिफ पॉलिसी इज, it is that. So when I was invited to the panel, so I tried to understand why this policy was made, right? So when you open up the policy, तो उसके अंदर objectives लिखे हैं. So I would request you give me some time I'll just go through the 4 objectives which are there. Sorry. So objectives of National Tariff Policy 25 to 30 is to improve the competitiveness of manufacturing, including the export sector, through duty-free access to imported raw materials by rationalizing the tariff structure, right? So ये तो already exist करता है. आपके पास EFS है, आपके पास दूसरे methods हैं जिससे आप duty-free packaging import कर सकते हैं, duty-free material import कर सकते हैं. But the problem is कि हमारा pendulum चलता है. So EFS के अंदर पहले 3 साल का एक था कि कोई पूछेगा नहीं आपको, फिर अभी टेक्सटाइल में तो EFS में बैन लगा दिया कपड़े पे और यान पे. So ये तो definitely this is not the, अगर ये objective है तो the result is going to be something different. और अगर ये objective है तो why can't the government just remove the 2% tax? Why can't the government just allow fabric and yarn to be imported in EFS और इस तरह की चीजें. दूसरा इसमें यह है कि to increase employment opportunities by attracting efficiency seeking investment in the manufacturing sector, right? जो इन्वेस्टमेंट आ चुकी है पहले उसको तो आप सस्टेन कर लें, एंड देन यू सीक न्यू इन्वेस्टमेंट, राइट? टू लेसन द डिस्टॉर्शंस इन द डोमेस्टिक प्राइस स्ट्रक्चर एंड इम्प्रूव कंज्यूमर वेलफेयर, टू रिमूव अनॉमलीज इन द टैरिफ स्ट्रक्चर. सो जब अगर आप ये पढ़ेंगे तो दिस इज ऑल वर्ड सैलड एज वी कॉल इट, आई मीन इट्स जस्ट समथिंग दैट एट द एंड ऑफ द डे व्हाट वी सी इज द नेट रिजल्ट इज रिड्यूस द टैरिफ. बट उसको प्रोटेक्शन कह लें, और उसमें ये भी है कि एक्सेसिव प्रोटेक्शन. सो व्हाट वन हैज टू सी इज पाकिस्तान की जो इंडस्ट्री है, व्हाट यू कॉल प्रोटेक्शन इज एटलीस्ट वी वुड कॉल इक्वलाइजेशन. सो वी हैव अ कंपनी विच इज द लार्जेस्ट नॉन टेक्सटाइल एक्सपोर्टर ऑफ पाकिस्तान, बट सिमिलरली वी सेल डोमेस्टिकली ऑल्सो, राइट? एंड दैट वॉज अचीव बिकॉज हमें एक sustained level of tariff की visibility थी और अल्लाह का शुक्र है मिलती रही and उसमें investment भी आया. So if the government thinks that by reducing the tariffs, they're going to promote investment without first rationalizing the energy prices, without productivity increase, and without tax reduction, I think this tariff policy is not going to help the government achieve its objectives. That's my comment.
Ji, thank you, Rizwan sir, and I think you made a very clear statement on the policy. I see Fawad sir,
just to take it a little further,
responding to that.
एक पॉलिसी थी, I mean, जैसे रिजवान ने अभी मेंशन किया, EFS की, government under pressure from some quarters, I mean, decided to reverse it. So they put a duty, import duty on yarn and fabric. It has not reduced the import at all. The reason is the cost of doing business. जब तक आप वो ठीक नहीं करेंगे, I mean, आप कोई भी पॉलिसी बना लें, it does not matter to you. आपकी energy policy है, interest rate policy. I mean, you have increased 300% gas in the last 2.5 years. आपका interest किधर है आपको पता है, आपका labor cost किधर है आपको पता है, आपकी taxation. I mean, you have double taxation on exports. I mean, दुनिया में ये कहीं भी नहीं होता. I mean, you are just going in the wrong direction. And then you give a policy that yes, we are going to fix it. जो चल रहा था उसको आप खराब कर रहे हैं और आप कहने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि we are going to fix it. So it is just creating a lot of confusion. It is, as Rizwan said, it's the horse before the cart. I mean, things need to be rationalized. जो cost of doing business को आप ठीक कर लें, बाकी काम खुद ही ठीक होना शुरू हो जाएंगे. आपके controls नहीं हैं. आप कर दें, I mean, जो भी आज है, आज वैसे भी जो कपड़ा आ रहा है, जो आपको local market से मिल रहा होता है, वो smuggling के through आ रहा है. तो आपके controls तो नहीं हैं. So it doesn't matter what kind of tariff policy you have, if you don't have controls in place, if you don't have policies in place, these policies are not going to make sense at this moment.
Ji, thank you, Fawad sir, and sort of just borrowing from what Rizwan sir was earlier saying, I think it's also when we talk about protection, we really need to understand what we mean by protection, right? And a lot of the debate that I see around that happens on when we talk about tariffs and protection is we criticize the policy instrument rather than how the policy is being implemented. And that's, I think, Fawad sir, what you sort of alluded to, that it's a one whole, it's not sort of one unique part and then you say that you fix the tariff and everything else will fix itself. That needs to be addressed. So moving on to Musadaq Malik Saab, sorry, Musadaq Saab, Musadaq Zulqarnain, sorry. So basically, you know, leading on to what Fawad Saab and Rizwan Saab said in terms of, you know, the other factors that are very critical, you know, which are sort of conditional in making the tariff policy successful. So, you know, we cannot, I mean, you know, government has an objective as Rizwan Saab read, so, you know, we want competitiveness, we want exports to increase, or at least government consciously is talking about export enhancement, right? But what are sort of the other conditionalities that really, you know, where we talk about structural imbalances, the cost structures and others that you think are equally important, without which having any form of a tariff policy would not really work?
So you mean about the exports? Okay, so first of all, let me also give a brief comment about the tariffs, because I'm also, along with Shabir, part of the working group which is working on the tariffs. So it's a bit complicated. I don't think you can straight away, what the government is doing is right and what we are saying that there should be no change is right. So I think there has to be something in the middle. There are some industries which are affected, and there you see we have been using 4 different type of tariffs. One of the base tariffs, then there are alternative duties, then regulatory duties, then there are dumping duties. So the process of dumping duties is very complicated, as we have noted. They are never extracted, even if they're imposed. So I think we need to review it from industry-specific point of view, where it is needed in ways. But coming back to your point, for exports and the trade, the situation is just like this hall just night now. JK is so tired, everybody is sleepy. So it is lost. We talk a lot about it. But there are many factors. First of all, we have unfortunately for last 77 years not graduated out of the so-called textiles. we still have 60%. I don't call them textiles, but I'll come to that in a minute. But whatever we call textile, we still have 60% textile. We should have, textiles should have grown, but we should have, you see, graduated to other segments. Unfortunately, we have not done that. And textiles is important because it's the largest employer. Even India doesn't, you see, disregard it. And now coming back to the question of textiles, you see, when we start talking about textiles, the whole concept is confused. And that is why, you see, now I think, at last now the government is starting to understand. Bangladesh doesn't export any textiles. Vietnam doesn't export textiles, very little. They export garments. So, and we call everything textiles. Garments is not textiles. WTO doesn't recognize garments as textiles. There's a value-added textile, which is home textiles, and then there are garments, and then the textiles, which is yarn and fabric. And everything is important. We have a history of 77 years experience, and the cotton, you see, for that. But I think we have always tried to, you see, do the basic stuff. A year ago, the USTR, they launched an investigation about the cost competitiveness of 5 countries. They were preparing for, you see, start, you see, putting restrictions on China. And so USTR instituted an inquiry, and they asked the International Trade Commission of USA to do an inquiry on that and submit a report. And the Pakistan ambassador and myself, we were the two who went there to give the testimony. And Cambodia was there, Vietnam was there, and Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. So after my testimony, I was grilled a lot by the commissioners that why are you exporting your yarn and fabric to your competitors? That means you can make more money there. And why don't you invest in garments and apparel? So it's a very simple, you see, understanding that we should have converted it. Now, the structural problem is that for yarns and fabric, the cost components are different. So apart from raw material, their major cost component is energy. So you see a lot of hue and cry about energy. For ready-made garments, energy it matters, but it's 8%. It's 8% of the cost. 20 to 25% is the salaries and wages. So in the last 2 years, because of the inflation, the wages have gone up by 30%. So that's 6% additional cost. How do you cover that? How do you cover that with all the US tariffs coming in? So, and in spite of that, we don't see much of growth in overall the segment which we call textiles. But when you look at the garments and home textiles, they are growing. In spite of this, they are growing. So if you remove these structural problems, these issues, and I'm never in favor of devaluation, but you are an economist, right? I'm a layman. And Dr. Sabha is here, many economists are sitting here. What we have, you see, tried to, as a layman, understand is that if you have a high inflation and your trading partners have low inflation, your currency has to adjust. Or if your inflation is low, so it has to appreciate, otherwise it has to depreciate. Similarly, you see, so your inflation was so high, and that's why we were facing that inflation. And also our policy rate was 22%, it has come down to 11%, and the currency has appreciated. So to me it looks like a miracle. I'm a layman. So the only way, you see, you can adjust this is by gradual adjustment of the currency to adjust for the inflation. Otherwise, you see, these companies, they can't bear the cost. So energy is there, the salaries and wages, and then our rules and regulations for our labor are entirely different from that of our competitors. There was talk about WPPF and things like those. So I think there are many other factors about the tariffs for exports. If you look at Rizwan mentioned EFS. If you look at the book, it's 150 pages. You see, it's a Bible, and it's so difficult. The regulations and rules are so difficult. Instead of enforcement, they keep on making things. It is impossible for a small and medium exporter to, you see, even use that scheme. And even they don't have the capacity to buy in bulk. They can't import. So I think there has to be a way out where you allow, simplify the scheme, and then if you simplify it, it's misused. So misused has to be, that's the governance issue. You can't punish the whole community just because you can't, punish a few culprits. But then you allow commercial imports through EFS, which can be made available for SMEs. Our SMEs have not grown, neither in the export sector, not in the, and without SMEs you cannot grow. So I'll stop it there. I think there are other things you might look.
Thank you, Sadiq. So picking up a couple of points for before I frame my next question to Dr. Aneel, so I'll come to you. I think few important points that you raised. So first, I think the differences you spoke about, simply textile and garments also, and then we look at other sectors. That also sort of highlights that a brushstroke policy cannot work, right? Because if your cost structures and the nature of your business model varies, then that means the policy needs to have that specificity and not a broad brushstroke that you can actually work on that factor. And the last point that you actually raised on also was in terms of governance. So whether you have a more what we call a protectionist type of a policy or a more free market policy, the governance of managing that policy is also very important, and the consistency of that policy is also important. And the third important point, and because Dr. Aneel, I want to use your economist hat to answer this. Obviously, if we go by the current tariff policy that we have, it will always take time to adjust for the cost differences or the cost disadvantages that some of it that you mentioned. In the meantime, as you mentioned, the important thing is the devaluation of the currency that consistently has to then go as the pressure on your currency increases. So, what is the policy on that? Because as we know, historically, there has been a tendency to control the exchange rate. And then if you look at our changes, they've always been in blocks rather than in terms of a consistent pattern. Whereas if you look at other currencies, there's more consistency in terms of how the rate changes, and mostly it's stable around that. So Dr. Aneel, in terms of these elements, how do you view the tariff policy, and what do you think are some of the areas or messages that we can get for the audience, and also from a policy perspective back to the government?
Sure. Whenever I'm talking both from the government sector and the private sector, I think whenever we talk about any problem in Pakistan, the quick solution is make a policy. And if the policy is not working, let's make a task force. So that we are doing for the last so many years. And similar is the case with the tariff policy. Secondly, whenever the policy is made, a checklist is done that, okay, we have done our job. And then the third thing that comes, okay, we have made the policy. Now, why the policy is not giving us the desired results, then we say it's an implementation failure. So this is the classic case, and I'm not just talking about the tariff policy. You name any policy, if that is not giving us the right kind of solution which we intended, we say there's a policy failure. With reference to the new tariff policy, we also talk about that the question should be, do we really need a policy? What if there was no policy? Would our exports have increased, or would they have remained the same? If you look at the composition of exports, we rightly said that we consistently think that the answer or the miracle that is going to happen, or that is going to make Pakistan very much equivalent to what Vietnam did, Korea did, or Bangladesh did, that is exports. But we have seen that exports have been stagnant for quite some time, and we have been making interventions of it. So if you look at the export sector, and I'm not specifically talking about the textile sector, I say that in Pakistan, the export sector is very much victim of the Bomel disease, that you are making interventions, you are making all kind of trying to make the structural changes, but the productivity is not increasing. That we see. Secondly, we are still relying on the traditional sectors. We have not made any innovations in it. So there are certain myths when we look at our exports. So the first myth, and I think we need to debunk it, that tariffs protect industries. This is what we have been learning in Econ 101, and we believe in it, but I think we need to break through. We need to have a change in the policy mindset that, okay, it's not about protecting the sectors, it's basically protecting the capabilities. The second myth, we have been thinking that, okay, the export processing zones, that cheap inputs, tax holidays, they are going to solve the problem. But no, we right now need export innovation zones. The third myth that we have been talking about, that, okay, we need hundreds of tariff slabs to protect the revenue. And as per one of our researchers that talks about that there is approximately a loss of like 8 to 9 billion if we are going to rationalize the tariff. And we are always scared of it. The fourth myth is that we also feel that only firms are there to build the factories. We have never talked about the models like where the governments can share the co-factory model. The fifth one is that we need to go beyond our 5 old traditional sectors, and we have to think about the future products. Like in our previous session, we were talking about AI, the cryptocurrency, like how these sectors can actually be evolved and we can actually go for that. Then one of the myths that we talk about, that exports always come after scale, and rightly we were talking that we have never focused on the SMEs. And one more thing that, again, I think it's a misconception that foreign direct investment will automatically going to lower the tariffs. It's not going to lower the tariffs. And the last one is that whenever we talk about that, okay, we need human capital, the quality of the human capital matters. It's not. It's basically that when we're thinking that, okay, human capital quality needs to be improved, we think that, okay, let's start opening the training centers. That is not an answer. So these are certain myths. Now coming on to the economics, coming on to the economic variables, well, the problem in Pakistan's policy making is that when we make one policy, it is very much made in silo. It is not corroborated, it is not synced with other policies. And the classic victim that Pakistan has becoming till today, that is a policy paralysis. That, okay, one policy is not syncing with another policy, and we think that, okay, this new, the national tariff policy is an answer to all the questions that Pakistan is right now facing. So there has to be collaboration. There has to be taken account that what monetary policy, what the industrial policy, what the new upcoming, the strategic trade policy framework, are they aligned or not? And if you see that we have done these analyses, that the policies are not aligned with each other, that's why the multiple problems, instead of getting a solution, that creates further problems with us.
No, I totally agree, and I think we do suffer from a disconnect between when we talk about investment, what is the purpose? When we talk about exports, so we go to Ministry of Commerce, they're worried about exports but not about industry, right? When you go and talk to industry, they're worried about industry but not sort of linked with investment and on that. Fawad Sahab, I'll come to you because you intervened, and so I haven't questioned you directly. And I understand your sector, but it's a broader question as well, and which has been talked about. So, Pakistan, probably if we look at our comparator countries, a better indicator is export per capita, not just nominal. So we see that there's a gradual decline in that. That means for every person that we're producing, we are gradually exporting less and less as compared to other countries which are doing much better than that. The other issue that we keep reading in studies and also in data is lack of diversification, and Aneel Sahab also mentioned that we focused on few sectors. However, if you look at trade data, so in the last 5-8 years, we have added 16 more products, which is much higher than India. But if you look, all of those products are baseline minerals. Now that also tells us in terms of how the overall export sector is transforming. So how do you foresee this as a risk? Because if we are just exporting slurry and copper in slurry, is that really what we should be doing? Because it's a rare earth mineral, and we are exporting that. And how do you feel this overall trade debate that is happening really impacting that diversification strategy as well? Because that's where new things would also emerge.
Anything being exported in raw form is not value addition, be it cotton, yarn, or rare materials. That means to convert them into a value added, there is something which is blocking it. It's the process itself. It's the process of converting it. It's, again, boils down to the cost of doing business, number one. Number two, why these policies don't change. or why, I mean, as earlier said, I mean, all exports are now looked at, it should be export-led growth. But all policies are reversing that, or all policies which have come in is not supporting that. It's the mindset of Islamabad that wealth creation is a crime. That has to change. The basis of all policies stem from there. जब तक वो change नहीं होगा, और ये जो word आज हमने बहुत बार सुना है, elite capture या elite, it's a very refined word of saying के सब चोर हैं. This is the basis of the thought process where the Islamabad starts from. तो कोई भी policy बनेगी, कोई भी आपकी justification होती है duties की, या कोई भी reversal आया है, जैसे EFS का reversal आया है, वो वहाँ से शुरू होता है कि यार आप कौन सी गाड़ी में बैठ के आए थे. तो it's the mindset, and if they don't allow wealth creation, why would anybody work here? Why would anybody invest here? If I'm living here for all my lives, my father has lived, my grandfather has lived, and now, I mean, we are forced to think, yaar, yahan invest nahi karna chahiye. And we are thinking, yaar, bahar se banda aake invest kar lega, and we should make policies for that. That's impossible. Agar bada hi return hota, and there have been industries in Pakistan, I mean, आप telecom industry देख लें, आप अभी minerals को देख लें, आप IPPs को देख लें, there have been people who have come and invest. How many people have come in textiles and invested? None. एक कंपनी है Chinese, उसको भी ये ज़बरदस्ती ला रहे हैं. Again, मैं zones की बात करूँ, and I agree, I mean, zones are not going to promote it. Now government decides that we should have, Pakistan has 44 zones, export processing zones, and they want to increase 10 more. I think 10 more are approved, so there will be 54 processing zones. अब ये कह रहे हैं कि जो नया आएगा वो चाइनीज को हम जोन में देंगे जिसके लिए 10 years income tax free भी होगा and blah blah whatever different import free and all those things. How am I, who's sitting right outside the zone, is going to compete in? Where is the policy? पहले मेरी policy तो दे दें कि मुझे किस तरह से export बढ़ाने की ज़रूरत है. लेकिन the problem is कि if I'm a part of this country, it's an elite capture, and that's where the wrong mindset starts with. If we don't fix this, other things are not going to work.
No, and I think, again, thank you for raising that point, and a linked element to that, because you mentioned special economic zones and export zones. So now the new agreement with IMF is the reversal of all of that. So government has actually agreed to track back over the next 10 years and exit out of...
Musadaq Sahab, wasn't it a fact that, I mean, they were allowing some Chinese to...
So recently, you see, they have sanctioned a few zones. It's a new, IMF had only allowed the M4IC, and all other was, you see, reversed. But now recently they have approved another 44 zones. They are new zones which have been approved. The small zones, but they have been approved. Most of them are private zones. They are allowed to sell lands, and the land is being sold at very high prices because those zones are supposed to have 10 years tax holiday. Which, as Fawad said, is going to, you see, it's not going to bring in more business, it's only going to cannibalize business from existing players to there, and it's going to create more complications. While otherwise it's a good policy, I don't oppose it. But then you see, what about the existing players? We used to have section 65B, if I'm not wrong, in the income tax ordinance, whereby you would get a tax credit for investment in machinery, existing machinery. You can invest ₹1 billion and you'll get 100 million rupees of tax credit. You can avail that. So things like those can be, you see, provided while keeping those zones and also incentivizing the existing players to grow. Adding to that, you see, while the basic concept is, I don't object to the basic concept that everybody should pay the same taxes. So the export sector should be paying the same taxes. We do have companies which work domestically, but predominantly we are an export. That's right. But you see, at the same time, if we have international competition and we have to, you see, offer prices which are internationally competitive, and in the end we make money and we pay taxes, but the return on investment is not enough. So we won't invest into those more. I can give you an example of my own company. We had a plan of investing $400 million in 4 years. We already invested $275 million. And we are now holding back on the rest of the $125 million Otherwise, now our exports are going to be at maybe 630-40 million dollars this year. We could have gone to $800 million, and we were planning to touch $1 billion 2 years from now. The investment is not justified anymore because we are a listed company, and there are stocks, my shareholders on the stock exchange. What would I tell them? There's another point which I would like to bring, which was, I think, discussed during the previous sessions also. We have so much of, appetite for consumption, especially because which is a good thing, there's so much remittances coming in. I'll give you an example of our own group. We have a Turkish joint venture for dairy products, and we make mozzarella cheese, which is sold to all the top chains, and we were exporting butter all for the last 3 years, because butter is a byproduct. It was being exported mainly to Turkey, also to Korea, to Lebanon. For the last 8 months, we have stopped exporting because it is still feasible to be exported, but in Pakistan, the price is 20% higher. I can export it for $4.20 a kilo. I can sell it in Pakistan for $5 a kilo. Why would I export it? Because there's so much of money coming in, and most of it money is untaxed. So unless you plug those areas, there's so much of distortion in the economy. I'll stop that. I think the first section, but I just wanted to share that.
How much time do we have? Yeah, okay. So the reason I mentioned zones and special economic zones was to bring another word that is contentious these days, right? So protection is one. The other is incentives, right? So basically what IMF has said is that, there are fiscal incentives in these zones which are distortive, and the government should move from fiscal incentives to cost-based incentives. But when you talk about cost, and all of you sort of eloquently mentioned the cost factors, my real question to any one of you can answer that are they incentives or are they public good? So if as a government you ask that you need to be provided utilities at an affordable cost, is that an incentive or is that a public good or a responsibility of the state to provide? If you ask that we need HR which is capable of taking the industry to the next element, is that an incentive that the government is providing or is that a public good? Because that word needs, like protection is also a word that comes under notorious criticism quite a lot. So Rizwan, maybe you can start.
देखिए, वो 2 दफ़ा I heard the comment that light at the end of the tunnel. तो मुझे जो light at the end of the tunnel नज़र आ रही है is that of the headlights of a train carrying a population bomb towards us, right? So हमने सबसे पहला काम तो ये देखना है कि whatever policies we make, whatever industry that we have, whatever people who are employed, because of the policy or a new policy, जो है वो भी ना चला जाए, number one, right? Especially with the population the way it is increasing, right? दूसरा जो है वो, अगर हम population की बात करें, so we've added 35 million children in the last 6 years, and we'll be adding 40 million children in the next 6 years. So it's going to be one Canada and one Saudi Arabia together, right? And we have to put all these people to work somehow. एक और मेरा आपसे one of the things which I can't sort of get to the bottom of, कि why do countries export? Because they have export surplus, right? So why don't we have an export surplus? Why? अगर आज इतने ही protection है जो tariff rationalization है, and I'm coming back to that same thing. अगर इतना ही protected industry है, इतना ही सब protections हैं, इतना ही tariff ज़्यादा है, तो why don't we have enough industries to service the demand? In fact, अगर हमने 2-3 ministers की बात सुनी होगी, तो वो भी ये कह रहे हैं कि यार वो जो remittance आती है, उससे इतनी ज़्यादा demand होती है, but local industries को पूरा नहीं कर पाती, और जैसे मुसद्दक़ साहब ने ये बोला, तो why don't we have that export surplus? Why? Is because of again, the bottom is the tariff or policy or reducing the tariffs will not solve it, is what we have been talking about and all the ministers have been talking about, especially Harun Akhtar Saab, very forcefully, that you have to lower the taxes, you have to lower the cost of doing business. And again, हमारा export क्यों नहीं हो रहा, उसका भी आप, a lot of people sitting here may not know, but एक तो 2% का tax है, फिर 1.85% का जो है infrastructure cess है. So कोई चीज़ raw material कोई चीज़ मंगाने से पहले ही जो है ना, you are 3% or 4% down compared to any other. One last thing is, you see, अगर मेरी एक, अगर मैं चीज़ को simplify करूँ, if I have a shop, और मैंने कल यही बात, that gentleman from the US जैक जो आया हुआ था उसको मैंने ये की, मैंने कहा यार you're from New York, he was from upstate New York, but मैंने उसको न्यूयॉर्क का एग्जांपल दिया, सिटी का. मैंने कहा you have a shop, वो सूट अच्छा पहना हुआ था. I told him, let's say this is a $3,000 suit. The same suit you're going to sell in Manhattan, अगर यही चीज़ आप हार्लेम में बेचोगे तो $2,000 की तुम्हें बेचनी पड़ेगी. तो पाकिस्तान के अंदर कनेक्टिविटी नहीं है, foreigners don't come in. Our brand Pakistan is not what it is like for all other countries. So we have to attract people with lower prices.
Yeah.
And if we don't have lower cost for doing business, we will never be able to export.
No, sir, since I think there is a lot of
quickly then we can move to questions as well.
मगर I think थोड़ा सा optimism भी होना चाहिए. Several ministers have been talking about the concession which the government gave. I just want to share that experience. I was heading that working group, and we took 2 weeks to prepare, get all the data, mine all the data, and prepare a report. And when we started sharing the report, and Prime Minister was stunned. But because I'm part of the, I'm not an economist, but part of the Economic Advisory Committee, without having any degree. But so I've seen the mood there, but this time it was totally different. The Prime Minister was in a very, very aggressive and a very to-do mood, and the whole cabinet was, everybody supported, and as Aurangzeb said, we had said that it should be abolished, but if you can't do it, at least suspend it. He said, no, we are going to abolish it. And the whole cabinet stood behind him, and the mood was totally different. So I feel that whatever they will be able to do, I think they now know that as Haroon said to, that because you closed down one of the units, so I think there is a sense of urgency. It's for us all to present the reports and make the working groups presentation in a way that Prime Minister is able to do that. There is a working group presentation on Tuesday, then on Wednesday. I hope there is something good will come out of it. I just wanted to leave this some optimism in the room.
Thank you, Musadaq Sahab. So now we'll open for questions and answers from the audience, for the panelists, please. If you can sort of if you have a directed question, please write, otherwise anyone can respond.
Sorry जी, मैं शरारत नहीं कर रहा, पहले माजरत करना चाहता हूँ. We all know that out of the 20 top companies on the Forbes or Fortune, around 18 are tech companies. 70 years investment in textile brought one Interloop $40 million. वो जो उसकी stocks की थी. How much? One story is Kareem, $3.2 billion. One man called Mudassar Sheikha. 18 Pakistanis are already founder of unicorns. मेरे सिर्फ पूरे PBC से प्लीज मैं ज़ीलफ से पहले माफ़ी मांग रहा हूँ. How much is the PBC's intervention in tech? Why are we still sticking to the old businesses and not investing in tech? Any one of you?
Question to Zilaf के लिए, हमारे लिए नहीं.
Why the Pakistani biggest companies are not investing in tech? Why
that is why 20% of today was about technology and new economy.
Yeah.
That's the change in PBC. So what does PBC do? PBC provides a platform, a hub, for discussing problems, challenges, solutions. And that's what PBC is doing. Why aren't more PBC member companies technology? So that is because we are now reaching out. Taraz is our member. Asif Peer Systems is our member. So any technology company that has achieved a particular scale is actually a member. So that also is a myth that needs to be debunked.
I think that diversification is there with a lot of companies, I mean, especially textile companies, because they do feel that they need to diversify. And I know for a fact that a lot of companies have diversified in tech companies, but tech companies, because of startups, are so small that it's not come into prominent, but hopefully we'll have a few unicorns coming out from there as well. So that diversification in the last few years has taken place, we can see that.
So, so I just want to push back and just ask you a little bit more.
There he is.
So if I just want to, I'm trying to understand your point that you're saying there are not enough unicorn founders in Pakistan. Is that your point? No.
100 PVC companies.
Right.
How many of their investments in textile?
Sure.
I didn't want to be very open.
No. So there's, like, for example, there's Asif Peer, there's Systems Limited, there's. Sure. Sure. So telecom, like, for example, we're building.
Why the biggest Pakistani companies are not investing in creating unicorns?
How are they not creating unicorns? So I think if I compare you to, like, so you, I think you give the example of Mudassir.
Except pharma, techno, I don't see many more are in tech.
I think they're all investing in tech in their areas, right? There was a discussion on AI, there's a discussion on efficiency. But if I'm just trying to understand, so, you know, I mean, I lived in the Valley, and there's a very different ecosystem. So if you look at tech, even in the US, it's highly concentrated in Silicon Valley, Sand Hill Road, maybe in Austin, some are in Boston. But you know, as a country, we're not as developed generally. We have not also gotten the level of investment. VCs, you know, if you go raise in Pakistan, we've had a significant amount, you know, of devaluation. So at that time, when actually we were getting the investments, when VC was just taking off, we had a massive devaluation. So there were some companies who actually raised $100 million. One company Bazaar raised $70 million. Everybody, you know, and I was speaking to these VCs, they had to write down even though this money was lying in Singapore, they had to write down the investment because of the devaluation. So I think, to be fair to Pakistan, I think we've not received the kind of level of venture capital investment that we deserve. I think that's why you don't see many more Mudassir Shekhas.
Yeah, I think, and let's move on as well. And I think there are also, in terms of very quickly
Let me ask a difficult question to all of my esteemed colleagues.
Asfa Saab had a question. Can we do that first, and then Zilif will come to you. Okay, Zilif, please go ahead.
So.
So that's right, but I think there are reasons for that in terms of why product based.
इसका एक simple line जवाब मैं दे देता हूँ, because हम जैसे लोग हैं ना, वो अब energy के expert बन गए हैं, तो हमारे पास time ही नहीं था कि tech का कुछ सोच सकें. So हमारे पे, so that is.
But you see, there are investments. Maybe they aren't significant. We have a company, Octans Digital. We have acquired all the IBM data centers here. They have produced a few IPs. The only traceability platform they have produced. So it's happening, but it's not unicorn. There is investment going on. Many other companies would be doing it. I think maybe it's not prominent. Maybe in the next year you'll find more companies. So I think let's. Oh yeah, exactly.
Danish himself is.
So
the question is,
please.
You know, and that's what this whole panel was also about. You know, it has to be value added, innovation, R&D. I mean, all of you sitting there, why don't you defend that? Why don't you say this is the BBC members, the ones who are being talked about, they are the ones who are doing these things, if they are. So going more into value added, having competitive industries, having higher productivity, spending more on R&D, these are what the themes have been. So that's what we should be trying to showcase.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe we need to do more, but many companies are doing this. For example, we have launched some sustainable, fabrics like with a banana fiber. It has been adopted by Guess for denim. We have developed fabrics, special man-made fabrics for Adidas, which they are now using. Adidas is now going to and obviously this is not to be quoted, Adidas has decided that Pakistan will be their main, biggest supply hub for apparel, and they're moving products here. So there's a lot of, our company has used AI to produce 3D designs, and many of the, you see, customers are using 3D designs from us. We produce their programs. We have even gone into an innovation, again created by our tech company, where we proactively go and see, there's a program which has been generated which go and see on the web the comments of our, like if I'm selling to a retailer, their consumer is commenting about the product. And we are picking up the comments and trying to see what they are liking, what they are not liking, creating projections for that, advising them how to improve their product, change their product, and it is being so there's a lot of innovation going on. Probably, I think we can showcase all that.
Yeah.
May I ask a simple question? I have been a student of all this, and also during my career in the government, we have discussed a lot of simplification of the national tariff policy. And of course, we have a medium-term tariff policy. And you have a working group or whatever now. What would you like to see in the tariff policy to promote exports of textiles? I'm not going into other products because we do know that we have a standing in the textile industry, we have investments in textile industry. And during my whole career, we've been talking about modernization of the textile industry and giving incentives for it. We have been talking about lowering the tariffs. Do you think the current tariff structure is still very distorted because you'll be giving recommendations for the working group? And if it's still distortion, where are the key what are the key things you'd like to see?
That's a very pertinent question. I think the world has, in apparel and garment world, has moved away and is moving away from cotton, right? So for all the activewear and for all the outerwear, cotton is not the fiber of choice. So we need fabrics and fibers and other value-added things from abroad. So from my perspective, anything which is for re-export should have zero tariff. We shouldn't be even asked to pay sale tax on that and then refund it. Nobody is doing that in the world. They have a scheme, EFS scheme, but as Fawad said, they recently took out some of the yarns and fabrics from that because they thought it's being misused. Instead of plugging the misuse, there you see, but the problem again is also with the SMEs. SMEs cannot import. They don't have the muscle because the big suppliers outside in the world, they only supply in bulk. They won't supply small quantities and they can't use the EFS scheme. So the only question is how do we promote our SMEs to export? Should we just lower the tariffs, which might hurt the local industry, or should we allow commercial importers, some certified commercial importers to import under the EFS scheme and then sell to those, transfer those goods, duty-free goods to SMEs. So that is the mechanism. But I think since I don't chair the group, I can't share the recommendations of the group here, but they will be more or less on the same lines, that anything for export, whether it's textiles or others, should not be subjected to any duty or taxes. It should be.
So basically, exports should be there should be tax neutrality for the exports. Is that principle understood by the government presently or not?
I think they understand it, but when they issue the SROs, they don't understand it.
No, but the reason why they impose taxes on import is because they use it as a revenue generation.
Absolutely.
No, Dr. Saab, it's not that. No, that's not the reason. I think
the sales tax is done for that.
Yeah, sales tax is a
It's done
revenue
for
issue.
that,
Yeah.
yes.
They want to hold that for 6-7 months because on our the balances of our fiscal revenue, as you know, with IMF is not on accrual basis. Whatever they get it and they hold it is considered revenue, even if it is refundable. So they hold it.
Taxes cannot be exported.
Yes, simple as that. See, I just wanted to add here what, what Musadaq was saying, that SMEs don't have this facility of import because they don't have the facilities, the banking and everything.
Let me make a point on this before you go further. Worldwide, particularly in Korea, and I had myself brought in Korean experts in Pakistan to get the government to understand what we need to do for SMEs, because SMEs bring competitiveness to our exports. In Korea, they had back-to-back LCs, which meant if you're a large exporter, you do a back-to-back LC and give the advantage of the tariff reduction or whatever, or financing. They used to give export refinancing to the small and medium enterprises. It doesn't happen because large exporter doesn't want to share the privileges.
I do that to a company in China, and they use my LC as back-to-back. Okay, so, but it is doable, but the problem right now is, jab SME mangwata hai, and when they're trying to convert it here, again, the cost is such, if there are no returns, why should they be in the business? And especially jo R&D ka business hai, ya value-added business hai, wo SMEs can do far better than big companies, because big companies have to look at the economies of scale and they will be doing massive products. In India, if you see, all the R&D products or handmade products or all they go from very small SMEs, and their export itself is far larger than combined export of all the big exporters. That ecosystem needs to be developed here for a complete system of exports. If that is not present, only this bulk exports is not going to do the job.
I think that's ended. If you have a very quick one, otherwise I think let's just
I just wanted to get your perspective on, I'm a researcher, so the idea of tariff reform comes maybe from the World Bank and the IMF in the 80s of globalization. So the idea is when you reduce the tariff, your input costs reduce. And of course, when you reduce the tariff, then like you said, the local market is more profitable. आप $5 की जब local market पे बेच रहे हो, आप $4 का export नहीं करोगे. So by reducing the tariffs and local prices also come down, export prices become more favorable. So this is what the theory says. I'm curious that on ground जिस तरह आप कह रहे हैं कि complementary reforms होने चाहिए, इस तरह alternate चीजें हैं जो होनी चाहिए. वो क्या हैं जो theory को prevent करें? Because theoretically, these are the distortions that you go away with when you reduce the tariffs. You have more incentive to export, right? So I want to know what are the ground realities that perhaps you guys have seen.
I'll take that question. You see, the thing is, मसला ये नहीं है कि local बेचें या export करें. दूसरे distortions तो पहले remove करें, real estate के, दूसरी चीज़ों के, other avenues of investment. So हम पहले वो चीज़ों कर नहीं रहे. मतलब ये बिल्कुल वही वाली बात है कि एक dehydrated बंदा है, उसको आप नमक खिला रहे हो, बोले यार अच्छा इसको कोई ब्लड प्रेशर का मरीज तो नहीं बन जाएगा बाद में जाके, ये डिस्कशन हो रहा है. सो उस बंदे को पहले आप खड़ा तो करें, सो नमक वाला पानी पिला के. सो बेसिकली दिस इज द डिस्कशन. देयर आर सो मेनी अदर एरियाज जिसके अंदर इतना इंसेंटिव है, रियल एस्टेट हो गया, बाकी चीज़ें हो गई. पहले उन चीज़ों को सही करें एंड देन वी टॉक अबाउट द एक्सपोर्ट वर्सेज लोकल प्राइस एंड देन द एबिलिटी एंड द इंसेंटिव टू एक्सपोर्ट. दैट्स हाउ आई वुड लुक एट थिंग्स.
But in principle, then, if you say you take it together, those reforms, let's say side by side ho sake in an ideal world, then do you agree with the principle then of this idea?
On principle, there is no disagreement.
Principle to principle.
But you see, your economic structure, and then that's what we've been discussing, that cannot be brushstroke. Your economic structure needs to support that. So I think with that, we'll just conclude, and thank you very much for your patience, given it was the last.